today's topic will be uncovering the hidden secrets of the MEP Productivity Manual, which is also known as the Productivity Pack user manual by CTC for all our MEP needs and the pack overall. All right, so just a brief introduction of myself. My name is Joseph Levija, also known as Joe Levija here with ATG USA. I'm a graduate with an associate's degree in drafting and design technologies. Um, I've been in this industry since 2015. This is actually my second career at this point. I've also worked previously within the MEP world, working in an MEP firm where I did some project setup and worked on the low voltage side of the world, but also worked as well with the mechanical, the electrical, plumbing, and really help uh, develop and work side by side with the BIM manager and everybody to bring that firm as well as some of these other firms up from AutoCAD and into Revit. I've also worked as a VDC technician and a VDC manager as well, covering the full MEP gamma and then also working on small, medium-sized projects all the way up to high rises and stadiums. So I've seen quite a bit of the industry. And then I do have a little bit of structural background as well, just a very short, minute period of time, and then a little bit of manufacturing also. Um, you can see my notable projects out here: Milwaukee Bucks Arena, Harry Potter roller coaster, Tomo Replacement Hospital in Tomo, Wisconsin, and then the Oswego Police Station out of the Chicago region in the suburbs out there. All right, so let's go through kind of the description of what today's MEP Productivity Pack is going to be. So today's description of this presentation is going to be the MEP Productivity Pack. We also refer to it as the MEP3. And this is going to be regarding the user manual, and it holds a lot of vital information for you guys. On top of it holding a lot of vital information, there are workflows in there as well. So we'll discuss some of that. We'll also go through and discuss how to utilize the MEP3. You will hear, if you guys ever reach out to us, some of us will refer to utilizing the MEP3 user manual as a tool. So we'll go through some of that as well. We'll also dive into some of the sections. We'll identify some of the YouTube videos that are attached as links in the MEP3 user manual. And then we'll discuss this being the main source of information for using the entirety of the MEP3. So again, if there's any questions, feel free, just shoot a chat out. I'll be glad to answer as I go along to the best of my ability at this point. And we're going to learn some stuff today. So now here's going to be our learning objectives. So our learning objectives for this webinar will be to break down this user manual's organization. We will also identify the video links attached in the user manual. And then we'll also discuss and review some of the key sections within the user manual. So that way, when you guys are going through this user manual, you guys have some type of insight as to where to find things and diving in there. So just some brief information discussing the MEP3 and the MEP3 user manual. With the MEP3 or the MEP Productivity Pack, there's a lot to it. So it's a very large, and I'll show you guys some brief information here. Let's see. So here's kind of what you guys receive. So this is a very large pack. Okay, within this pack, what you guys are going to notice is we've got add-ins out here. So this will be some of our Dynamo scripts and stuff. But there's a lot of content meaning families, content also meaning tags, information like that. So you'll see some of that. You also see There's a sample project included as well. Within that sample project, there's a lot of information, and then within this MEP 3 user manual that we have here, you'll see some of that information that's highlighted, some of those graphics and stuff. They are pulled from some of that sample project in there. There's also a whole series of schedules involved. And when I say schedules, I mean schedules for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So some schedules go on sheets, other schedules are for reference only. Okay. Then on top of that, you'll see some information within here that we're going to discuss. Oh, okay, so you can only see the PowerPoint screen. 1 second here. Why is it only showing? Here we go. That's better. Flip-flopped on me there. Okay, so I got that taken care of. So just showing you guys. And you guys can see my file folder here, correct? As well as the main overall PowerPoint here. Awesome, thank you guys. So within this as well, we have a share parameters file, and we talk about a master share parameters file as well. So there's some discussion of that within the MEP3 user manual also. Something else we have out here as well is, especially for you guys who are somewhat newer to the world of Revit, we also have a starter project out there also for MEP. And just a heads up on that starter project, it's a pretty substantially larger starter project than what some of you guys may be currently used to. Definitely want to make sure you've got a PC with a little bit of horsepower in order to run that. And within the MEP3 user manual, you're going to start to see some of the items that are actually in there as well. And we look at the starter project from the standpoint of it's easier to delete some items than it is to go in and have to go hunting and add stuff and everything along those lines. So there will be some of that discussion out there as well. And then naturally, we've got our user manual. So, and user manual, we have a PDF version here. So this is going to be one of the latest user manuals that we're going to dive into. Some of you guys may have an older version of a user manual from, say, 2014, 2016, 2017, 2018. This will be one of the latest and greatest versions that are out there. And there's some, when I went through it, there's some subtle differences, but it still holds true to what the user manual has been and will continue to be. Okay. So, and then there's also instructions out here as well. So let me see if I can pull this over a little bit. This just kind of gives you starter project setup type instructions out here. So, but this is going to be some of the basics that we go through. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to chat it out there. So, next thing we're going to go into here, we're going to dive into Bluebeam at this point. So I use Bluebeam. I know some people out there don't necessarily have Bluebeam yet, or they utilize more of an Adobe or something along those lines. You can open up this manual in whatever PDF viewer that you guys choose to utilize. So I have a preference for Bluebeam. I've been utilizing it for a number of years now, and it's second nature to me. So in Bluebeam here, so this is the basics of the start of the user manual. So it's going to be your cover sheet here. If we go into Bluebeam, we've got two options here to really diving into this. So we got our bookmarks, but we've also got our thumbnails as well. So you can kind of see what you may be looking for, and kind of diving into this as a faster option to see some of those sheets or whatnot. So I like to go combination of both. If I know what I'm going for right away, I'm going to snap a finger and basically dive in here, and um, I'll find that sheet real quick visually, or um, just kind of scroll through it. Now, with the way this is set up here, we can see in Bluebeam we've got 269 pages within this manual. It does sound like a lot. However, within this user manual, the 269 pages, they're not all very wordy or anything along those lines. There's a lot of valuable information, and what we suggest is, and what I did as well as all the rest of my colleagues, when we got the MEP3 and we started playing with it, because I was actually at a firm when my firm purchased the MEP3 before I started with ATG USA, we went through and we read through this manual. We read through its entirety. So this is one of those things that we highly suggest if you have time before you go neck deep. Make sure you get in this manual, dive into it a little bit, get a good understanding. That way you can formulate any questions you have. And then also, if you have any questions for us, you can get in touch with our tech team, and we can answer some of those questions. So one of the biggest questions that we see a lot of, that I train a lot on, is going to be implementation. Okay, so that's something to kind of think about. If you guys don't have something like this at this point, and you plan on bringing in something like this, or you're going from the AutoCAD world into the Revit world, you're still kind of learning, and you've either gone through the Revit Essentials training, or you haven't necessarily dove into it yet, but you got it on your plans. At that point, definitely take a dive into this, take a look at it, but we can discuss that within our training, and I do that a lot with a lot of my clients, just simply because it's a very large pack, and workflows are a little different in the essentials world when you're beginning Revit versus when you get into the actual productivity pack. And that's why so many people, when they get into the productivity pack in general, they dive into this manual quite a bit. So overall, we're going to start with the introduction here. This is going to be our user manual. You can see this is from CTC. This is their user guide. Okay, and as they make updates, they keep this updated. Okay, there is a table of contents in here. You guys can see some of the table of contents. So by utilizing these bookmarks here, you can see some of the spread that we have in Bluebeam. This will also, again, be in Adobe. As we start to expand some of this stuff out here, you can also see as well some of that information, some of the additional key points. Now, if I bring this back up and condense that down a little bit, one thing I want to point out to you guys when you're looking at this, the starter project versus the workflows for mechanical, plumbing, and then electrical, they're separated into sections. So your main overall introduction section is going to cover that introduction. It's going to cover project setup and kind of the overall project browser aspect. Because this is definitely a lot different than what most firms are starting out with, especially firms that have been in Revit for 6 months to a year, and may have had a little push-pull action going on there with people who don't necessarily want to move into the world of Revit, and other people who are gung-ho and fighting to get into Revit. So this is where I suggest definitely starting out learning how this project can be set up, because there is a method in this user manual to setting up the project with current starter project that's out here, and actually being able to set that project in an hour, 2 hours, first time through, somewhere around 4 hours, as opposed to some of us who've gone through, and I mean, we're starting out and it's taking us 2 days, 3 days, sometimes a week, depending on the type of a project that we're working on. So there's a whole different method of setup, and there are different workflows in there on project setup that, frankly, don't necessarily present themselves all too well with how Revit kind of comes across when you're looking at the standard out of the box Revit. So then after we get through project setup and overall Revit MEP3 or MEP3 pack, you're going to see we jump into the mechanical world. Okay, so that's where chapters M1, M2, all the way through M13. That's where we see a lot of the mechanical information. Okay, keep in mind with mechanical includes mechanical and plumbing. Okay, so we look at this from a holistic standpoint where you got the mechanical side of the world and then you got the electrical side of the world. So mechanical tends to have that piping, those ducts, all that other information, and it bunches plumbing into there as well. And then the third section here I looked through is chapters E1 through E5, and that's going to be the electrical section. So they're definitely a little bit organized differently. So from the mechanical side of the world to the electrical side of the world. So those are some things to definitely think about as you're going through. Mechanical's got a lot of additional information out there, especially considering the way we think about the MEP aspect, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Plumbing tends to be its own dedicated world to most of us, and with them incorporating the plumbing into the mechanical, that's why we've got some of these extra chapters out here to cover for some of those plumbing items and fixtures and stuff like that. So just a heads up to that. Some notable things to really look at when you dive into this. Chapter 2, at the end of chapter 2, there is step-by-step instructions here for project setup. And guys, if you're using Bluebeam, you basically just come in, you click right on that link, and all of a sudden you're at the YouTube site, and you can start to go through the 90-minute video on setting up a project. It's that quick, it's that simple, it's that to the point. Okay, so there's multiple links like this throughout the whole pack, and this is where I suggest if you're going to go start playing around, this is where I suggest to get that visual representation, and it's right embedded into the actual user manual pack. Okay, so if we come back up to chapter 2 right here, you can see some brief information on this. You can see there's a project browser organization. So for you guys who play the project browser and you start to like to mess around with it, kind of like I do, we've got options in our project browser. So it kind of dives into some of that information out there as well. Remember too, with project browsers, you're not just going to control the views, but you can also set up project browsers for some of your schedules as well. You can set it up for some of your legends and your sheets. So great tools to utilize to organize as you go along, because as we know, when we're working in a project browser, by the time we get to the end of that final phase, our CD phase, or if we're working on a VDC project, when we start putting those shop drawings together, this project browser grows, and it grows substantially large. So some information on that as well. We also talk about levels and everything like that, reference planes, which give you the option, especially when you're working on earlier stages of a project. So the way I like to look at projects, we talk about SD, DD, and CD phase. So schematic, design development, and construction docs. When we're looking at that, if we're in DD phase and we still don't even have a ceiling plan or anything along those lines, the MEP3 is thought out well enough to where we can adjust accordingly, because we're expected as the mechanical team or the electrical team to start having stuff embedded into our model to hit that deliverable the same time that architecture, structure, and any other disciplines are expecting to produce. So whether we have something that's set in stone, for a ceiling plan or so on and so forth, we have to account for that. And the MEP3 kind of goes into some of those detail items about what they account for, such as reference points. So this is just some of the basics that we have out here. We'll go through view scope boxes. There's talks about AutoCAD backgrounds and everything like that. We get into project browser. As I talked about project browser, we have multiple options out here. So you can see some of that. We can also dive in and see some of the videos on how to play with the organization. But keep in mind, this is definitely, this user manual is going to go into all these different options here. But I definitely talk to people and tell them to look into what you're working with, what you're seeing, and then take that and expand upon that. So take this MEP3, look at all the different ideas, reverse engineer things that you want to reverse engineer, and then go forth and build it to your company. There's a lot of amazing options, and it should help to get the ball kind of rolling with the firm to start really pushing those next levels. We talk about Revit, we talk about this MEP3 as something that we're looking for a return on investment. Well, return on investment for guys like us is time. Time is of the essence because these projects are getting bigger and bigger. They're requiring more and more. And time just seems to either stay the same or get smaller. And then we're putting out fires at that point. So definitely dive in here and make this your own to figure out what works best for you guys workflow-wise by taking some of these ideas that you read about in here. And also videos here and there that you also see as well. So those are some of the basics that are out here. Once we also dive into this, some other areas of which that are notable will be chapter M3. This is our Cartesian Arm, okay? And for those of you who haven't heard necessarily about the Cartesian Arm, this Cartesian Arm is embedded into our families that come with the MEP3. And the idea is to basically be able to rotate those families around orbitally and be able to function in ways that traditionally we have to fight with Revit on. So if we've got, like, say, a 45-degree angle on a wall and we're trying to, say, mount a thermostat to it or something along those lines, or put a data jack or an electrical outlet, it's going to act up depending on how that family's built. Well, they built an articulating Cartesian arm, and they nest the family in there, so that way now we can rotate multiple ways, and we don't have to sit there for a half an hour and figure out what's going on with this family. Why won't it stick to this freaking wall? So we've got some of those aspects in here as well. And this chapter here kind of goes through how this whole process works and what it can do, and gives you some more information on that. Recently, kind of learning more and more about this too. There's things you guys can do within your families as well that you may have to help bring that functionality with this Cartesian Arm that comes with this pack. So something to definitely take a look at if you're a family builder, or you do content creation for a living, or just kind of enjoy messing around and doing your own content creation. I definitely suggest taking a dive into this chapter here, M3, and really kind of learn a little bit about what's going on with this Cartesian Arm, because it's legit, it works. So some other things to kind of look at in here. Remember, with how a lot of what we have here is set up. We've got a lot of share parameters and everything like that, so don't be afraid to dive into the share parameters. I can tell you from my experience working within an MEP firm, or like a consultant design firm, we sat and we fought for about a year to try and get a share parameters file built up. So having something already established that works with families and works with systems can save a lot of headache and everything along those lines. and you'll be able to read through some of those shared parameters as well as what goes into some of the back end of the families on here as well. So definitely take a little bit more of a dive into some of that type of stuff. Right here, we're talking about shared parameters within the ARM in itself, and that's kind of how it makes how the Cartesian arm and shared parameters make kind of things go a little bit more. So then if you ever have any questions or anything like that, you could actually take a look through some of the schedules, and you can build your own schedules with some of this information as well. So one thing I do want to point out to you guys as well when we're looking here, so this is cold water pipes, and this is going to be our type properties per se that's inside a family within itself. You can see all the information within here, and then you can see the formulas and everything along those lines. So within this pack, you can start to learn a little bit about what is actually put into that family to make that family function a little bit differently. So, and then you can notice here within the formulas, we got if-then statements and all kinds of different information out here to make these families kind of do what we want them to do, calculate where we want them to calculate, sit how we want them to sit, think down the line. So instead of looking at a family and thinking about, okay, I need this, I need fixture units, I need some flow information off of this one family that I have here. We start to think down the line. So going from one plumbing fixture to the next in that whole enclosed system per se. So those are some things that we look at and we think about, and it talks a lot about that within the user manual in general. Okay, you can see here's one of our VAV boxes, discusses some of the VAV box information, and for instance, it's going to have a clearance zone out here as well. So you'll see some of that information. Also, guys, you're going to see quite a bit of information as well on how this pack kind of works in the aspect of thinking about mechanical or thinking about plumbing, but also understanding that those specific systems are not just specifically mechanical and specifically plumbing. Those specific systems have additional elements in there, such as electrical. So now, all of a sudden, when we're talking about a motor, we're putting together a motor list schedule because our VAV box and our air handling units and some of those different fixtures like that actually have electrical components in there. Where now we have the ability to go through the manual, see some of that information and how it depicts into that motor list schedule and some of the information that actually pushes over there. Okay, so this will give you some of that brief bit of information that's out here as well. So it's kind of thinking about some of that type of stuff. Also, so let's go down the systems real quick. So we've got kind of like an overview of our mechanical symbols list. So you can see everything that's kind of out here. Also within the MEP3, there are views set up so you can actually see what's within the actual MEP3. Keep in mind when you go to open up a large symbol view or you go to open up one of those views that have basically everything in it that's live, it takes a minute to open up. And if your PC is on the struggle, so if you're doing this, say at 2 o'clock and you've been using Revit all day, probably want to restart before you dive into that. Otherwise, you're going to crash the system. It just unfortunately happens. But this kind of gives us some of the options that are already embedded in here for systems. So you can see the duct systems, the hydronic systems, fire protection systems. You can see the plumbing systems. These are already pre-built, pre-ready to go. For those of you who like to build some of this stuff up or are starting new in Revit, these are all the systems that are already taken care of. And when I say already taken care of, they're already color coordinated. You can see that there's a different line type out here. They've got their abbreviations. They're set up to go in a sense of you start drawing or you start not drawing because this isn't a Revit or this isn't a drawing tool. This is actually a modeling tool, mainly information, idea of BIM. But you start doing your modeling there, and when you're doing your modeling, the first thing you need to understand is, with all these systems already pre-built in here, you're going to have your fittings, you're going to have your information out there, such as what's running through those pipes. So if it's water or if it's some other type of material, um, you're also going to have temperature. You're going to have all those extra things filled out that, for most firms, developing something like this takes years, years to get this whole thing set up. You're going to have this right away ready to go, and it's going to explain that information here within the actual manual. And then it's going to give you a video on modifying and adding to those systems. Okay. So those are some ideas to really dive into. There's also piping modeling information out here, as we talked about. There's different, within those systems, we've got materials and everything called out. So that information's out there, and be surprised, some of that actually has a different calculation method that comes up depending on the material. So Revit's starting to get smarter, and we're not necessarily, being the MEP team, we're not necessarily on the back end of everybody's thought process anymore. We've got options for us now, which is amazing. So we go into plumbing fixtures. Plumbing fixtures, guys, for those of you who do plumbing and understand that when we're doing plumbing, the architect gives us something special, and it 9 out of 10 times that that water closet, that urinal, or any of the other electrical, or not electrical, plumbing fixtures that are out there, they are strictly for show. There's no calculations being produced, any of that. There's a solution talked about in here regarding plumbing fixtures. So definitely suggest taking a dive into that and seeing what those options are, and seeing how those plumbing fixtures are really set up, because there are some pretty interesting options out here. So you can see architecture versus what we put together. Okay, so essentially, sneak peek to it, plumbing fixtures that we built, basically like little hockey pucks with all the information we need to schedule. So that information is embedded here within the actual manual. All right. Then we get down to other things like duct modeling, air terminals. You can see some of the tags here, some of that information, mechanical equipment. We talked about calculations and stuff, annotations. So we got a bunch of information, loads, stuff like that. And then we've also got details. Guys, if you're definitely doing a bunch of different details and everything along those lines, the MEP3 has a specific setup here that we talk about in training, where when I suggest setting up for a specific department, I suggest having a starter project, and then having a container model, and then finally having a sandbox model. So essentially, sandbox model will be our sample project. With this, the container model, we have a container model with details and schedules for mechanical, and then for electrical, and then we have that starter project that covers all three. Okay, so there's information on some of that in here, and then how the labeling and everything along those lines go. I believe we're accumulating like 700 or so details between the two container models for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So a lot of information, and those are Revit details. And the benefit to having Revit details rather than doing what we used to do, where we dive in AutoCAD, try to bring that over and either link it, or we try to import it and explode it and clean it up a little bit. With the Revit details already being clean, clear, and ready to go, just go to that Insert tab and transfer them right on across and bring over what you need, as opposed to a huge chunk and killing your model at that point. So those are some of the basic things that are out here as well. And you can see insert from file. Keep in mind with 2021, we've got this button here has moved to the end of that portion of the ribbon when we're in the insert tab. So they've added some extra stuff, so just kind of keep that in mind. It may walk away on you, disappear for a second, but now we get into the electrical world. Electrical's laid out a little bit differently. So we can see here, we see a lot of paragraphs, we see a lot of talk about information and stuff like that here in the mechanical and plumbing world. Electrical's laid out a little bit differently. So, but we talk about now design, plumbing or power design, lighting design, system design, and you can see more of a step-by-step aspect here in the electrical world. Okay. Obviously, you know, with electrical, we do a lot of symbology and information like that. So that information's already out here. Definitely when you start to dive into some of this stuff, going through the manual, definitely read through kind of how they're telling you to follow that workflow. Most of us understand kind of the general workflow for electrical, but there are some subtle differences in here. And just definitely as you're going through this as well and you're placing some of your information out there, some of your receptacles, your data jack, so on and so forth. Within the properties is going to be some more information as well. So just kind of follow that also. But this gives us some of the workflows and some of that type of information out here as well. And again, if you have any questions, definitely feel free to give us a call. We're here to help you guys out. We also do training on this manual as well. So, and the whole MEP3 in general. But when you also get into some other areas here, so like the wiring diagrams, guys, definitely take a look here because there's an alternative route working with design options and stuff like that on putting some of this stuff together. So just kind of think into that a little bit as you go through. There's a different alternative setup there. So and that's going to be for more of the one lines and risers basically. So it gives a brief explanation out here on some of that information, and then if you have more questions, definitely get in touch. We'll take a look at it. There's also I believe we have some of those wiring diagrams embedded into one of the, I believe the electrical container model as well. So you'll see some of that information out here as well. And then finally, there's a whole slew of different schedules and everything like that. So you'll see some of the schedule information out here as well to help out with the lighting fixture schedules and stuff. So keep in mind within this user manual, it's going to give you, I'd say when I read through it, about 95% of everything you really need to know and dive into. And then that remaining 5% you'll pick up kind of as you go and then as you ask questions and stuff like that. So those are some things to definitely think about. Outside of that, if you guys have any questions, again, feel free. This is kind of the overall with this manual. And this really kind of dives into things. Unfortunately, I mean, in order to train and kind of teach on this manual, I can be here all week. But this gets you guys hopefully started, hopefully helps kind of direct you guys on where to go and how to kind of look through and dive through some of this. And again, we're all here to help out wherever we can. So just kind of a recap on what we dove into a little bit today. We wanted to break down kind of the organization, looking at chapters 1 through 3 being more the project side and the overall setup of the actual user manual itself and covering that project setup and that overall use. versus that number 2 section here, which is going to be the mechanical and plumbing. And those are labeled under chapters M1 through M13. And then finally, we end up with the electrical section that covers E1 through E5. So if you're not 100% sure right away, as you're going through, you can definitely see the M's versus the E's versus no letter in front of it for chapters to indicate where you might be at within that manual. Okay. We also saw that there are video links. So there's a lot of video links out there, and on top of those video links that you see in the manual, there's a CTC YouTube page, an ATG YouTube page, which will have some of our webinars, such as this webinar and many other webinars on there as well, and allows you to learn more and more of that information. Okay, and then we also talked about some key areas to definitely discuss within the user manual that you guys will end up diving into, and that I suggest going back and forth with on occasion. So for me, the way I learn as I progress, I'll go through something 3 or 4 times. So for instance, the project setup in chapter 2, that video link in that section, in order to really get that understanding of how to set this up, because it is quite a bit different than what I've done on a VDC standpoint and in my design firms that I've worked with. I went through that 3 or 4 times. I went through the video and then read through the information. So definitely chapter 2 will teach you guys a lot. And then now I'm at the point where I'm creating some stuff on my end just to play around a little bit in Revit when I have my free time. And I take some of those ideas that they have and I incorporate them and then push it to that next level. So also for our content creation guys, or just people who are interested in some of the content creation as well, or have ever had the problem where you stick something somewhere and it just doesn't sit there and fit correctly, take a look at that Cartesian Arm on chapter M3. Okay, and then finally, chapter E5. There's a ton of information out there on the schedules and stuff like that, and seeing what comes about and being able to really check through what you've got going on there for your circuiting, and even seeing like the motorless schedule and stuff like that. So that way, the way this pack is built, you can see where electrical talks with mechanical. Okay, and if you split up the MEP starter project from having mechanical, one for electrical, and one for plumbing, there is a way where the mechanical information, so the motors and mechanical, still talk through electrical when you link them in. So there's information in that user manual that talks about that, and take a look at it. Okay. Outside of that, if you guys have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. Phone number here on the bottom. And then definitely there's some of our sales information out here as well. Thank you everybody for taking the time out of your day. Had a great time. And if you guys have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help you guys out in any way possible. I'll let you know we have the MEP3. We also will help out with training. We can help out with any overflow project work. I know coming off quarantine, we got a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, just let us know. Thank you guys.